I welcome you, and we're kind of entering the home stretch of the journey along El Camino de Santiago. And last time I described before Christmas going up to the high point in the Montes de Leon, um, and where there's a little cross on a pole called La Cruz de Ferro, the Iron Cross, and um, and I was walking without a companion. I knew at this point I had different friends coming and going along El Camino de Santiago, but this is one of the most strenuous parts, and so it was just me and the other pilgrims I met along the way for this. Um, this gives you a little picture of uh, the journey from the Montes de Leon, and it was very challenging downhill hike. You see, you're watching, you're looking down there and saying to yourself, okay, that's where I'm going. Okay, take a deep breath, drink lots of water. It was a heat wave. It was mid 90s. And so it was difficult. You can see, I think I decided to just wear a day pack and send my backpack because in that heat, that was something I could shed, plus my feet were starting to hurt more. So that's part of the story here, um, was that these were long days. On the downhill, I walked 45 miles in 3 days. And So, have we been able to hear from everyone who wants to share at least about a gift you've received sometime, somewhere in your life? I know at my table, it was interesting, the gifts that were being talked about the most were invitations and opportunities. What about at some of the others? What kinds of gifts were being offered or shared?
What I got out of this table was everybody's gifts for a person.
A person coming into your life. Okay.
Whether it was parents, mentors, children.
Yeah.
Friends.
Those are important. Yeah. Good. Other comments or observations from your own conversations? So that lifted that invitation to, be reflective on the example of how might you want to play around and joyfully give in some sense in like manner in which you've received, if that's possible. I'll just leave that as a question for us. And it's not just for us personally, it's for us corporately. Let's just talk together. What do you think is an important gift that has come to this congregation? Keep going.
The sabbatical grant was huge.
A sabbatical grant.
Brandon.
Vicar Brandon, who now Pastor Brandon.
Voices.
School having a relationship with us. I missed one over here.
Oh, I said Vicar Naveen.
And Vicar Naveen, now Pastor Naveen. Mm-hmm. Great.
And I can't forget Eric Wobble.
Pastor Eric Wobble.
Our wonderful cantors.
Cantors. And the gift of music generally, perhaps. Our gifts this congregation has received. Yes, very much so, Troy.
Again, all people, well, except for the grants.
Right. So it's a combination of sometimes money, but also people, relationships, the gifts they bring into the community.
Sow seeds.
Sow seeds. This group that has come together to do powerful work together and support individual work as well.
Karen Parker.
Mm-hmm. Karen Parker was a part of this congregation and a friend to some.
No, I just didn't hear.
Oh, yeah.
We have a couple of
ladies who come to community table and they're not part of the church. So,
Associates is the same way.
yeah.
With the
There's a
church.
lady who comes from the Catholic Church, and then there's a lady who's unchurched, and she comes. She actually works in associates also.
Great, so we could generalize a little there to say some of the ministries of this congregation include people who are not worshiping with us and yet desire to serve alongside and as a part of us in some of the service to the community and world. That is a gift indeed. It speaks of the Holy Spirit's doing something there, right? So if we think of those as gifts, and this morning in worship we installed our church council, and people of God all promise to support and be in ministry together with the church council. I always want us to be doing discernment and not just leaving it up to the church council, to have it be an open feedback loop where we're saying, when we think about those gifts, how are we as a congregation? What are some ways you think we might be being called to give in gratitude and celebration for what we've together received? Is there anything that suggests itself to you? I think these are interesting times for churches generally, but the whole world. I think a lot of us are feeling a little bruised and battered still after pandemic losses and changed lives in some cases from those things. The way we worship, having a hybrid church, many things have changed. So it feels to me, and maybe to some of you, that in our sabbatical year last year, we sort of took a collective deep breath and worshiped and lived in appreciation. And maybe now it's time to invite in that newness, a new vision for, okay, now it's 2023. The cataclysmic change has happened. And now we're riding a new reality. What are some ways when we reflect on these gifts that maybe we're being called to be in ministry, be in mission, be in service? Just throw out ideas. It's time to play here.
The focus on land acknowledgement, and the church is beginning to be open to supporting Native American causes and beginnings of reparations, etc. Both that. But the Lutheran has featured several articles about Native American ministries and cooperative worship, interfaith worship, including Native American and their spiritual gifts and traditions. So I see that as a really promising part of the church's openness, even though it might gain some opposition. I just think that recognition of the past participation is co-opted. What do we call it? The word is escaping me right now, of complicity in oppression of Native Americans.
Thank you. And I appreciate the way you connected that to, the acknowledgement of the gift we've received, to suggesting maybe there's a celebratory way forward. Other ideas, other thoughts?
I know some of us are troubled that we're only giving 5% benevolence,
Okay.
when we would like to up that to 10. If you had a lot lot of experience with the ELCA as a body, or even the Lutheran Church worldwide. They do marvelous things. And the Slovak Lutherans now are supporting Ukrainian refugees. And it's a way for us, it seems like we're not getting benefit from that benevolence that we give, but we do. We get huge benefits. When we went to Norland with the group, Molly's group, some of them said,
I didn't go.
oh, you didn't go.
Darn, but no, I didn't.
One of the locals said, oh yes, there were Lutheran youth who helped clean up. We had a name, she had a name for us. I was touched by that effort.
Thank you. So you're recognizing the gift that we're part of a larger church community. And that might suggest a kind of giving in return, which we do, but an increase in that perhaps is a suggestion. Thank you.
We could be more aware of the different programs.
Yeah.
You know, when we have a fundraiser here for something, people are very generous. They open their pocketbooks and throw money at it. If it's just the ELCA, if it's benevolence, well, what is that? It's a line item in the budget. But if we highlight more
What it's doing.
yeah.
Like the quarterly missions,
Yeah,
I always look forward to finding out what the quarterly mission is and learning about what that outreach will do.
I was hoping we could have had a speaker from, was it Valentine from Amundsen? I think the timing wasn't good, but I think that would have highlighted that.
I agree. It was,
Maybe we can still have this.
we tried.
Yeah. He can come late.
Maybe the time wasn't right. Yeah.
I was gonna say the quarterly missions. You know, this congregation raised almost $10,000 for Ukraine. Yeah, it was 9,800 and some dollars that we raised for Ukraine.
Thank you. That's a way of inviting that kind of. Yes.
If individuals wanted to provide support to the ELCA, could they write a check to Advent with a notation that it's to go to the ELCA rather than to Advent's budget?
Yes. The answer is yes. Sure.
Do we give up on the refugee, trying to get a refugee family?
We didn't give up. We were contacted to say that there's not an active program in our area for that. And so they thanked us for our efforts in preparing for such, but that there's not at this time a match there to be made.
If I may add, it's through Lutheran Social Services that we don't have contacts. The Jewish, I can't think what their name is, are active.
Mhm.
And we, I think Associates gave them a sewing machine. And so there are other groups that are active.
There might be, yeah, if there are.
There are.
Is it possible the interfaith group has taken that on as something that they would support as a group and we could work?
Well, I will put forward an invitation for lay people from Advent to become involved in the interfaith community of South County, ICSC. We don't currently have a person who's active, and other faith communities have one or two. So if a couple of people from our community wanted to take that up, please talk to me, please talk to Linda. You could talk to Ed Merrill, who served in that way. I think there's possibilities before us there.
So that would be a position of going to meetings or being
It's
a contact person.
That's right.
Okay.
It would be participating in meetings of the Interfaith Community of South County, which is a layperson group.
Any volunteers at the moment?
Should that be added to the
start there. What about local sharing of the gospel? What about inviting people and families to worship God, to come to know Jesus? We're all here because someone invited us. So it might have been a parent in many cases. But it was, we take it for granted. And
One way of doing that is telling a story. Tell a story about your church or
We talked about the ministry of music being an important gift. And prior to COVID, we were a venue for a lot of musical events. And that's how Tom and I came. We were singing in a choir that held a performance here. And the more we have community using our facility, the more facility can become to people who might not know about us.
And I agree with all those suggestions, and I think we've been pretty good at them. I'm going to push y'all because that still presupposes that someone might have an interest in the church. To have an interest in the church, you have to have an invitation to that Jesus is worth knowing and spending time with in worship and in community. Maybe I'll just leave it there. But, I'd like for us to think about it. Think about what we might be willing to do. So along the way, I finally got to Ponferrada. Thanks to Otterpop and water. And it was a pretty little town. This just gives you a few ideas of the landscape along the way at this point and some special places. And along the way the next day, which was still very hot, there was another casita, little house, oasis for renewal for pilgrims, refreshment oasis for pilgrims. And so it was just a little house that someone had donated right off the path, and you could go in and sit down, and there was fruit on the counter. Volunteers had, were refilling ice water containers, and there was electricity, so you could recharge a phone or device if you needed to. And there were creative spaces for people. And so this was one of in the creative space in the back, there were just art materials and chalk, and someone had written this, which I found so beautiful. The fruit of silence is prayer. The fruit of prayer is faith. The fruit of faith is love. The fruit of love is service. The fruit of service is peace. That was beautiful and inspired. And that, part of the gift of this was inviting people to bring out their own creative gifts, again, to externalize what had come to them in that moment. So I spent maybe 20 minutes there, rehydrating, resting, and then going on and on and on.
Fruit trees or wine?
Big like citrus.
Yeah, it was both. There was both along that way.
Not even in that picture.
Yeah. I can't go back on this long recording, so sorry. I don't think that was I don't think that was a fruit tree or the taller trees were not fruit trees. But there were some vineyards still in that region, not as many as in the earlier regions. It's hotter in this area. So I came into a city called Villafranca del Bierzo. We're right here on the map. Another hot day. This was an abandoned Romanesque church from the 10th or 11th century along the way. And I walked into town and had to look up on a little map, where was my hotel to try to find my way. So I sat down, there was a big public fountain. I sat down. I did have my big backpack on that day. I sat it down next to me and a man waved at me from across the street. And I waved back. And then he crossed the street and said, what are you looking for? I said, I'm looking for my hotel for the night. And I looked up the name of it, and he says, oh, he said, you're in the right town, but it's on the other side of town. Okay. And then he said, just kidding, you're here. And he said, come on in, Anita. And he picked up my backpack and brought me inside. And there was a little restaurant attached to the hotel. So I said, and he said, I'm not going to check you in right now, just sit down. I know I was very hot. And he poured me an entire carafe of sparkling water and just said, let's just sit and visit for a while. And so he wanted me to, rehydrate and, feel good. And he said, we have time. And his name was Danny. And so it was such a warm welcome. That literal cup of cold water Jesus talked about can be the best thing ever. And then, so I went up to my room, and I had seen a sign while I was checking in that said, ask about laundry facilities. And I thought, oh, good. If I could do a few things and not just in the sink tonight, then that would help. So about 45 minutes later, I showered, came down and said, hey, I saw a sign about a laundry facility. Can you point me in that direction? Tell me what I need to do. And he says, oh, just bring me your clothes. And I said, well, just tell me how it works. Anita, just bring. Okay. And I brought down this bag of dirty clothes. And he says, Anita, just go rest. And so I did. And a friend was coming to walk the rest of El Camino with me, so I was waiting for her. And after a couple hours, and she came, and I'll share that story in a minute, but after a couple of hours, then he returned with a tray and my clothes clean and folded on this tray. Again, what an amazing gift. Sometimes just seeing another person and maybe what they need in that moment was really beautiful. So old friend Leslie met me there in Villafranca del Bierzo.
Did you leave your shoes there?
Yeah, this is the same model of shoes. I ordered some, I was in touch with her, messaging her beforehand, and I
see that they're the same shoe.
I know, I said, can I order some shoes through Amazon and send them to your house and have you bring them to me in Spain, because obviously I needed them. And so she was willing to cart over a new pair of shoes, and I could leave the old ones right there in the trash. And it was a great opportunity for us to share the end of El Camino de Santiago. She's been a friend since my first week of seminary. Her husband is Jim Lapp, who's now the pastor of St. Stephen's Lutheran Church in Santa Cruz. And, but we were together in Chicago, and we've been within driving distance of each other in California for many, many years. And so had weekly dinner and prayer groups that we just organized for ourselves and a couple other families in Chicago, and then did that monthly for many years in California. So very, very dear friend. And in February of 2021, Leslie was walking her dog in her neighborhood, and a pickup truck that was jacked up high ran her over. And she nearly died of her injuries. She had many, many internal injuries, broken bones, head wound and injuries, all kinds of things. And I actually received the call from the police officer at the scene because it was the last call on her cell phone was my number. And so, so she made a remarkable recovery from that trauma through the grace of God and many, many ministrations by medical staff and surgeries and whatnot. And she wanted, out of gratitude, to walk this pilgrimage and also show, you know, have it be something she could work toward in her own recovery, that she could now walk a pilgrimage, and that we would do it together. So that was a tremendous gift to be able to share with each other. You know, all of these are questions of hospitality and sharing stories. And I'm wondering what, if any, questions do these stories of hospitality evoke for you?
I think about this summer when we were trying to spruce up the yard, and it was really hot, and we were tired, so we went home unfinished. We didn't finish the work outside.
Mm-hmm.
And then when we came back to church the next day, it was finished. It was like, you know, the shoemaker and his elves. and we didn't know who had done it. And it was this homeless gentleman, Luis Gonzalez, and he just came over and just.
Does he have a truck?
He does.
Wow.
A very full truck.
Because we were here, I guess it might have been, I don't know, it was a Tuesday, but it was one that in the last few weeks that we didn't have a community table, I guess. And he was sitting in the parking lot in his truck. And he said, I guess there's no community table tonight. And I said, oh, that I don't think there is. And he said, but I want you to know I put your trash cans away.
Well, something that he does every week that we have community table, he waits until the end, and if we have 10 meals left, he takes those meals to different people in Morgan Hill that he knows don't
Could
have
use a
any
meal.
food. Yeah. So, yeah, he's a nice man. He's been doing some work out at our house.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
he
So,
works real hard.
so it's that one thing inspires another, right? It's, yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you. Does this raise questions for you? Mhm.
I guess the question that brings to me is when especially this time of year, when I see something somebody does really good for somebody that they don't even really know.
Mm.
I mean, it's just a person being very good to them. I think another portion of the world, what's going on, and it's just the opposite of horrible stuff going on. People treat each other horribly, and you just want them to be like the people that are being hospitable. And the question, why can't we get more? Of course, I think the Bible answers that. You know, Jesus Christ is the answer to everything. But they don't have that story. They don't have that. But yeah, I mean, but whenever I see somebody do something really nice for somebody unconditionally, then why can't everybody be that way? That's the question that always comes to me.
Thank you. And so you're starting to answer this question, how can all of us support this congregation as a whole in understanding our calling to give and serve pilgrims in our community? One of the things about, I was clearly a pilgrim, but the experience of pilgrimage was, it reinforced the view that, goodness, every human is walking a pilgrimage through life. We're all on our way from somewhere to somewhere. And we're all kind of along the way each day. So what does that look like?
Well, one thing, I don't know if everybody even knows what's going on, like on Tuesdays and, Thursday, food bank. And Janet, of course, is trying to make sure people know about associate some, but
Yeah.
I don't think a lot of people really understand what our outreach is in this city. Or you have meetings and people, for a long time, you used to have it in the bulletin, who is using and renting out the rooms or what organizations meet here. Most people don't know anything about that.
Like the anonymous meetings, is that what
I don't know who meets, I just know that sometimes we'll be here, like when we were here that Saturday, making the stocking for Christmas, there were women coming for something over there, that's all I know.
Do you have a suggestion in relation to that?
Well, I think, if we went back to our newsletter, our monthly magazine type newsletter, I think things like that be mentioned in it.
Is Carol Romo's
More
group,
communication.
Sorry?
is
Right.
Carol Romo's group still?
Not currently,
Yeah.
but they have. Yeah,
I mean,
it's there on the calendar.
yeah, but how many people are gonna go on the calendar on the computer? It's like food and fellowship. We had no idea what that was until finally in January. Nancy Lee's inviting the whole congregation. Meanwhile, you've been having dinners at people's homes, and people come in sometimes and watch things like that, and you don't even know exist. I had the same feeling with Sophie. I was here a year or two before I even found out what Sophie was, and when it met.
Well, there's a good opportunity there, and I think each group can take some responsibility also for maybe submitting an article in our, we have a weekly email.
Right.
So each group could do some inviting that way.
Yeah, I know Jeanette's talking about one for us.
Yeah, so, because inviting is powerful. And I think that's hopefully what we can each, understand that we have a role. And if we see that people aren't being invited, how can I help facilitate that invitation? Maybe. Yeah. Because my view is it's up to each group to extend those invitations, and we have good platforms for doing that.
I totally agree with that. A lot of us, we have so much time, and we decide. We're all a gift to the church. I like that. Each one of us is an important gift to the church. Just because we're here, we're doing something. And all of us give so much of our time and talent. But, so that attitude's there, but I think it's important that the groups within the church ask people to help. I mean, you know, when I first came here, they asked me to be treasurer. I would have never thought to volunteer for it, but I was asked, and I did it. And, you know, there were certain things I did like that. Most of it was because I was asked. I was always so busy, I didn't have time. But when I was asked, I took the time. So I think that was a very key thing. Whoever said that the group ought to be asking people to join and help, because people feel wanted, I think that way.
Yeah, sometimes just taking that next step, you know, of creating that invitation. It doesn't have to be fancy, but
Like
it's.
Nace asked me to do things, right? I wouldn't go up to Nace and say, hey, do you need any help? He asked me, yeah, I want to help you.
Yeah.
But if you didn't ask.
So I had this thought in the back of my mind of having a handful of people from Advent invite a handful of people from Voices School to say, would we want to explore together like a small family chapel service after school on Wednesday? That's, you know, explicitly Christian. But, you know, it's a way of inviting those who want to shape an experience of worship for children and families. I don't know. Is anyone here interested in maybe having that conversation with me and with them? Thank you. I think that sometimes it's just creating those invitations. And maybe it won't go anywhere, but I know I want these next generations to know the love of God in Jesus, and that might be one way that we can be sharing that together. Well, I thank you for sharing your stories today. I think I'm going to stop there instead of moving into the next and last phase of the pilgrimage. We'll do this the next 3 Sundays. We have a congregational meeting on the 29th, and we're working out the details on that, but that will be a Sunday morning. That is a day that we have to have that meeting. So